Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Cheryl Durst, the EVP and CEO of IIDA. Welcome to Community as Strategy, the San Francisco edition. Glad you all are here. We are going to, before we head into the rest of the program and into our content, let's do just a little bit of housekeeping so that you know. This webinar is accredited for 1 hour of IDCEC CEU credit. To receive the credit, you do need to attend the entire program. We promise it will be well worth it. And then you'll get the paperwork that you need. We'll provide you with the documentation. And why don't we just jump right in? And I'd like to officially begin our program by welcoming and asking Deb Brunig of KI to join me on screen. Deb?
Well, hi
Cheryl. There.
How are you?
How are you? Good, 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 good. Deb, let me turn things over to you as we are gathering here with our San Francisco audience. I feel that with every program, we seem to be on the edge of a news cycle. And, you know, here we are talking about community, and there's a moment that I think we'll all be feeling and seeing yet more civil unrest. And, you know, it just means that community and embracing our community is so important. And not just when we talk about place, you know, understanding that we're all connected. And I want to thank you and thank KI for continuing this series of conversations across the country.
Well, it's certainly our pleasure to sponsor this, and I couldn't agree more. When we started this series in 2019, it was a whole different world, was it not?
Yeah.
We could not have predicted this. Kicked it off in 6 cities, and here we are in 2020. And I think, you know, we know that community has really been vital to our survival here, and will even be more so as you move forward. And I think really one of the points we always talk about is the resilience of human resilience, and even gathering everyone here tonight is a great example of that. So we're really proud to be bringing this, the speaker series, and to be here this afternoon with the San Francisco team. And again, just we have to keep this conversation going, and just really vital. So I'm going to kick it back to you, Cheryl.
All right.
Keep us on time here.
All right. Well, the conversation matters, and we're very fortunate this afternoon to have 3 designers known to the San Francisco design community. But let's create some community, and let's invite all of our attendees to join us in the Zoom room. So we are going to work some magic, and everybody is going to be visible in just a bit. You all will be receiving invitations from Team IIDA to start your videos. So let's have some folks join us on screen so that we can make some eye contact and say hello. All right. Tracy's on. There's David. All right, this usually takes just a few seconds as people join. There's Loretta. There's Phyllis. Come on, don't be shy. Join us on screen. It's allowed.
I showed up as Loretta. Sorry.
You did. There's 2 Lorettas. Christina, Peter, welcome. Ashley, is your last name really Vineyard? That's amazing. And you live in San Francisco?
I'm in San Jose.
Okay. But still, what a great last name. All right, I think sometimes people don't want to come on screen because they weren't prepared for that community moment, and they're not always Zoom ready. I can appreciate that. few more folks are joining us on. All right, thank you all so much. Thank you for attending this afternoon, being a part of this conversation and joining us on screen. We're going to do another community moment at the end of the program during the Q&A session, but it's just nice in a Zoom environment to see faces and see the folks that you're talking to. I think we all miss being in a room together, and for folks that are presenting, having that eye contact with your audience is such a vital component of having these conversations, and sometimes we miss that on Zoom. So I'm always very grateful that we are able to do this moment and actually see who's in the audience. So as you go back to your seats, we are going to ask our panelists to stay on, and we're going to do some quick intros as our attendees are being converted back to the audience. And I'm really honored joining us for this conversation today, Amy Campos, Chair of Interior Design and Associate Professor at CCA, California College of the Arts, and a past Educator of the Year. Bravo, Amy, and thank you for joining us. And also David Meckley, FIIDA, a new fellow in the organization. David, as you know, is a principal at Huntsman in San Francisco. Thank you, David, for joining us. And Sandra/Sandy Tripp, who is a principal and managing director also with Huntsman, but in the New York office. So welcome to all the panelists, and thank you all so much for joining us and participating in this really important conversation. And I'm going to give a moment so that we can advance some slides. There you go. And we are going to start our conversation. It's almost impossible to talk about community without talking about brand and culture, all very important components around a community strategy. And obviously all those components have been affected through this lens of the pandemic that we're living through this lens of social and cultural unrest. And Sandy, I'm going to ask you to kick us off. How have brand and culture, how do we interpret brand and culture in the midst of this kind of dual pandemic that we're living through?
So, I wanted to start off by saying that we interpret culture the same way, whether we're going through a pandemic or not.
Right.
You really can't have culture without drilling down to understanding people. And, you can't have brand without people, you can't have people without brand, right? So
Right.
Culture, understanding what really blows your hair back about why you want to be a part of that organization or that company or attracted to that brand. Once we understand what that is, then supporting that either in the physical environment, or now we're moving towards trying to create virtual environments for that, it's a little bit easier. But, brand is really how we understand what somebody wants to say about themselves, but that falls very, very false if it isn't supported by what they do and the people that kind of walk the walk and talk the talk every day. So this was a project that we had done for Tarkett, actually, for their showroom. And the idea was to connect with their community beyond just being a showroom. They wanted to connect with creators and makers and other people that are tangential to what me as an interior designer, I'm their client, right? But I want to be inspired and I want to get to meet people in different ways. So the design of this space was all about creating a place for connection, and in maybe in unexpected ways. So it was co-working, it was a place where they could hold, seminars. Right as the pandemic was starting to happen, they were starting to do fitness classes there. And they've even pivoted now to hosting some of these things virtually, but they're still letting people use the space in a socially distanced way so that they can push that stuff out and support the community in a bigger way.
Sandy, in the absence of physical space, which we're all invested in, designers are invested in the absence of physical space, what kinds of things are clients talking about rallying around for their employees, for, you know, for the folks who attach to their brand. When there isn't physical space to rally around, what do we rally around?
Right. So what we rally around is our community and the people that we, you know, we're all in this together, right? You heard that, and that felt very special when this whole thing started happening. But it's true. And then that can be about your local community, that can be about your neighborhood, it can be about your families, but it's also about, you know, we all spend a tremendous amount of time together as coworkers in a work. And we're working with a number of companies now trying to identify how can we continue to help you rally around something, right? But the organization and the brand has to be strong in order for that to hold true. But just the human element and connecting. And I loved what you said about everybody turning on the screen for a minute, because that's so important. If you can't feel like there's a human being at the other end of this crazy computer, you're not going to make that connection. And you know, talking about how I think the statistic is over 60% of our communication is nonverbal, and you shouldn't be looking at dead space when you're trying to have a conversation with someone. So we're trying to help our clients understand, even if we're going to go to, you know, some sort of hybrid environment in the short term, and who knows, maybe forever. You have to be just as conscious of the people that are out of the office as in the office, if you're going to manifest it in a physical way. And maybe we need to think about more screens. I hate to say it, but if you're in the office and you've got somebody at their desk and everybody's plugged in and tuned into a screen, what's the point of going to the office, you know, even if you're socially distanced? But if then half of your team is working remote, you've got to double down on communication. And so I think that, you know, we can do a lot with space, but I think that helping companies realize the importance of their internal community, and we've all heard about, you know, the Zoom happy hours and the this and that and the other thing. But I think that, you know, also being sensitive to there can be a little too much screen time. So you can't just replace everything with a screen.
Yeah, you're so right. Zoom exhaustion is for real. And you know, and there are only so many Zoom happy hours that you can attend, I've heard. But so those attributes, let's talk a little bit about what communicates community. You know, what are some of those attributes we talked about kind of in this absence of place? You mentioned we rally around people. We also rally around purpose, right? So what kinds of changes are you seeing out there with prioritizing health and wellness as it's connected to community?
Well, first of all, wellness has been a priority it felt like even before this pandemic. Now it's the leading statement, right? How do we make sure that wellness is folded in? And wellness is so many different things. It could be access to daylight. It could be, let's now think about the HVAC systems, right? But I feel like thinking about the mental health aspect of this, I think to me that is the most fascinating part of it, because we're thinking about the whole employee now and understanding, and finally some of those shields have come down that, you've got a variety of situations happening here where not everybody is just like this robot that comes to work and has, you know, everything's left behind. You're seeing the mess. And the thing about what are we seeing organizations do? You know, this law firm that we've worked with nationally, they work with leading tech companies, but they also work with startups. And some startups are totally bootstrapped. They do not have space of their own. They do not have places of their own. And what was important when we designed this space for them in New York was they wanted to have a place where they could come and actually their clients could meet with other like-minded clients and learn about how to evolve as a startup. Like maybe they didn't have an HR person, or maybe they needed to learn about some other aspect of their business because their specialty wasn't that, right? So the thing that I feel is so admirable about this law firm is they don't need to do that, right? They've got plenty of clients, but they're smart about trying to find a way to give back to their maybe emerging clients, but also their community as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's part and parcel of being a good corporate citizen too.
Exactly. And, the other thing that we've been seeing a lot more of when you go back to the wellness and understanding, we're seeing real estate briefs come out now asking us to make sure that we're designing in a more sustainable way. And I love that because, really the master of interior design is taking an old building and redoing it again and again, right? Doing that in a way that supports the environment in a positive way. And our clients are saying, you prove to us how you're going to do that. Are you going to repurpose things? Are you going to be creative about ensuring that when you create this space for us, you're not necessarily wiping the slate clean? Maybe that's not what we want. What we want to make sure is that we're providing the best space for our people, but we're not harming the planet while we're doing it, or at least minimize what we're doing there. And I think that's super admirable as well. And it's the greater community, right? I mean, what greater purpose is that than caring about the earth?
Right. And given all of the upheaval and unrest that's happening, particularly in the US, we certainly have climate upheaval and unrest. And there in Northern California, you are right on the edge of that. It's very real, probably more so real for you all than a lot of other folks. Let's talk a little bit about clients. And David, so there's a wide and diverse portfolio of clients at Huntsman. Have you worked with clients who've come to you specifically asking about community goals or community as part of their strategy? Has that been primarily workplace? Have you seen that in other disciplines? I'd love to hear you, share with us in the conversation that happens with clients about community. Oh, you're mute.
I heard that's the t-shirt of the year.
There you go.
Of course, that's what you're going to do. And the dogs bark any second. Yes, definitely. We primarily do work in workplace, and I will say, hospitality and retail and stuff, they've always had a need to bring community into, because that is where their business is, that is their clients, where, the office space for the most part has been allowed to be somewhat separated from community, particularly the community around them. And, but, with the blurring of our lives and social media, now it's going to even be more so. I don't think companies can do that. So I think a relatively new thing for us is for companies that have gone beyond simply like, oh, we're doing some charity work, to how do we actually become part of the community. And what I wanted to present here was a project we did a few years ago for a very large tech company. This was a 14-floor downtown campus. And one of the challenges they came to us with is, they were talking about how the Bay Area is so innovative and everything, but research showed that over 60% of their employees had lived in the Bay Area less than 5 years. And so they were saying, like, these people didn't necessarily come to the Bay Area for any reason other than the job opportunity. And they really wanted them to be more absorbed in the community and understand the community. And so what we actually did was combine another initiative they also had, which was to bring the community inside. And we created kind of one program that wrapped both together. And what we did is partly, we had over 500 rooms to name in this project, meeting spaces. And what we decided to do is kind of name them after what we call game changers, innovators, and rebels and outcasts that San Francisco is so famous for. And then wrap that in with what started out as historic eras, but ended up being divided into types of work, like musicians and rap writers and politicians. And we even had characters, just people that are weird, that are in San Francisco. And each of those were like assigned to a floor. And ultimately we had to name over 500 rooms after these innovative people who for one reason or another were attached to the Bay Area. And then, you know, the signage obviously for the room included that. And then additionally, there was a website connected where the employees could actually go like, okay, we're in the Charles Crocker conference room. Who the heck is Charles Crocker? And so it was a way for, you know, hopefully getting them to really understand the area that they've been in, get more inspired by the area. And then in addition, we also did a community art program as part of this. So the next image shows one of over 80 pieces that we had commissioned by a group called Presidio Eyes. Presidio Eyes is a group that helps street artists, which in particular the Mission area of San Francisco is known for. And so they work with street artists as a nonprofit. And so we worked directly with these street artists, and we combined the floor concepts and the innovator concepts and then the artists. And each one of them got to create these pieces for around the floor. And additionally, we also hired one digital artist who created these really elaborate elevator wraps. If you look really closely, there are elevator doors in some of those.
Oh, yeah.
These are just, you know, a wall covering that wraps, but each one introduces the theme of the floor. And one of the things that this client was doing prior to the pandemic is they were, you know, offering that nonprofit group could bring people through the space occasionally, not very often, but occasionally. And that way the artists had a way of showing off their space and stuff. Now, how this will change post-COVID, unfortunately, we don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was such an interesting challenge to be asked, like, how do we bring the community directly in and then encourage our employees to be more connected and thus reach out?
Yeah, really engaging the employees with that place. That statistic you had about people being in the area for less than 5 years, they wouldn't necessarily have learned anything about San Francisco other than that I'm coming here to work. And so that ability to be able to understand not just the space that you're in, but who that space was named after and why, you know, providing those teachable moments. That's such a great example of making that transition from a space to a place. And we know that, right, space is a physical construct, but place is incredibly emotional. Those images, David, from that, from your client they were very visceral, right? They, you know, they activate your brain, they're very dynamic. And Amy, I would love for you to kind of address this transformation of space to place. And, you know, what's required to make that transition from a physical construct to something that we have an emotional attachment to?
Yeah, so, you know, I'm primarily an educator, so I think a lot about this stuff in terms of the structure of approach to a design problem, right? So that's what we do as educators. So in this particular studio, the project was a restaurant, but we asked the students to engage it on a couple of levels. So first we asked them to do a series of very short competitions to design first the air, then the light, and then the sound, each separately as a separate competition. But before that, we asked them to write some stories about the people who might be in the restaurant. So what you're seeing here is some of those stories kind of come to life. So this was a particular couple who was sort of on their last, you know, chance of their relationship, sitting in the previous slide, sort of in the hallway alone in case they got loud. And the student was thinking about, you know, what is the kind of engagement of this couple and how do I design around this moment of heightened emotion? And so you can see things like the chairs falling over and the fire in the table burning the love letters and the sound of the chair crashing and things like that. But I think, you know, the kind of core idea here is that we start with the stories about people. You know, as designers, we're really designing, and Cheryl, you've heard me say this definition before, that designers are really about orchestrating human performance using the interior as a tool to design culture, right? So those
Mm-hmm.
qualities of the interior, the air, light, sound, the furniture, the architecture, those are our tools for making place, right? Through the engagement of people's stories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amy, as we kind of make that transformation, that transition from space to place, when we talk about community, right, it's always not the most immediate community. There are always stakeholders in community. And, you know, how do we think about, how do we talk about the people that are indirectly affected by what design does? I immediately kind of go to gentrification. You know, the issues that are affecting urban communities in particular. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so these images here are, you know, repurposed materials being made into new products. So sweaters or belts being made into lamps and a rug and things like that. But the larger sort of conversation that we have around projects like this is the idea of impact and understanding as a designer sort of what are the many scales of impact that you have in all of the decisions that you're making. So we talk a bit about the kind of impermanence of interiors. You know, I think Sandy mentioned this, that you're kind of constantly refreshing architecture. And that's a real part of what we do as interior designers. And so we have a kind of, we need a critical perspective on how to engage material life cycles, end users, you know, understand waste streams, understand, in this case, new technologies to help us better those infrastructures that we have impact on. So understanding not just aesthetics and the kind of finished product of our particular design problem, but the kind of before and after, you know, of what we do.
Yeah, that's perfect. David, Amy was touching on a bit about the effect that design has on a community. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of social responsibility, kind of now versus pre-pandemic. Do you want to kind of address some issues around social responsibility? Oh, he's mute again.
Okay, I'm just going to leave myself unmuted.
There you go. There you go.
I think that, you know, it is becoming very, very important, particularly as we become more mobile. If you think about it, what connects you to your firm is the culture, and that culture is what you believe in and your values and how you express your values. And so now it's going to be more important than ever in order to keep people emotionally connected to their employers and to each other, to have things that you're really passionate about and emotionally for, and not simply be and now, you know, again, the physical space as much as possible has to also express and help with that. And it did bring to mind this project we did for Argonaut. We actually presented this project in this seminar last year. So if somebody was here for last year, they might remember it. But looking at it a little bit differently now, this is a project that happens to be in the heart of the Tenderloin, which is one of the more transitional areas of San Francisco. Let's just say it's a challenged area right now. There's a lot of homeless, a lot of people who are suffering in the area. And it's always been that way. So this is not new, but it's a little more in your face right at the moment. But what this client, Argonaut, did was, so they took over an old ballroom space that just also happened to be the start of a rock musician kind of concert hall for many years, where the Grateful Dead and Janis Joplin started their careers. Supposedly Janis's ghost is still walking around the space. And, you know, one of their goals from the beginning was not only to have a place that had a lot of impact for themselves, but a place that could be used for other functions. And so we literally designed a stage with runways, kind of reminiscent of the rock stage there, that people can do. And they use this space constantly for events. Most of them free to the public, and a lot of them for nonprofit events. And so the space is constantly being filled up with people and elements. And then additionally, there is one area of this floor that's completely open to the street front. I mean, when we walk by, and rather than have their desks or anything else on there, they decided to create a public art gallery space. And so again, they're bringing the people right in and off. What's interesting with the pandemic and what's happened is they just, February was, Black History Month. So they had an exhibition about Black culture in there, and it hadn't been changed out prior to the pandemic. And then of course, George Floyd happened and the protests happened and everything. And they actually allowed community organizers to use this gallery space to have some initial meetings and to reach out to people in the neighborhood. So they, again, the space is large enough, you could do it with social distancing, and it was good. And so I think, that's an example of, they showed their value of wanting to be part of the community and help the community. And in fact, we've heard they've asked to also be a polling place for this. You can get a lot of people pretty safely distanced in this space. I don't know if they're going to be approved, because I guess there's some rules against it being a place of business, but I think, again, it shows their heart is reaching out to the community, trying to bring them in.
Yeah, I love that example of how an exhibit for Black History Month, it turned in from an art exhibit to an activist exhibit.
Right.
And the exhibit didn't change, our times changed.
Right.
But they were able to reflect the times, and that's so important. Design is both optimistic and activist, and it's great that space was able to reflect that. Amy, let me turn back to you and talk a little bit about this grassroots effect that community has. We all want to feel a part of something. We all want to feel engaged and attached to a community. And we know that we can organize and structure around purpose. We can do it around place. What else does design do in the pursuit of and the building of community?
Well, I think, to go back to this notion of being really great listeners and, being collectors of stories, and we empower those stories through the designs that we engage and make. I think understanding that interior designers have such a big role to play right now, given the context of COVID and all of the things happening in the world, that our expertise and knowledge will need to be applied in spaces that we typically don't, design for. So in this case, you're seeing an urban furniture piece designed interdisciplinarily between interior design students and architecture students, working with city planners and the Embarcadero waterfront and community organizations to design and realize these street furniture pieces to activate a public space. And in this case, I think, the perspective of an interior designer being able to connect with that community there and facilitate a kind of realization of a way to engage in that space was really impactful. And I can really see that being not just this project, but all over the place, a model for how we get through this moment together. Yeah.
Special question for you as an educator. How are you talking to your students? How are you talking to design students about creating community? And I'd love for you to give a little bit of insight maybe about what you're talking about as the future of community. Your world as an educator has changed, like the education of art and design and the studio has changed. And how has that affected your curriculum?
That's a great question. I mean, it's been a big heavy lift for sure, to get used to this way of interacting with each other. But we've also realized there's just a ton of opportunity to collaborate globally. So like this semester, we're running a global studio that's partnered with 8 other institutions around the world. It's interdisciplinary. It's using different, new technologies and tools to work together across the globe, which is really amazing. And we're also, and we have been facilitating interdisciplinary projects through the school for quite some time. So this last slide is showing you a lighting project that an interior design and interaction design student collaborated on, that then received a grant and was installed and in a community in Uganda to provide community lighting. And so it was, again, you know, a way of just being able to listen, to understand your impact as a designer, and to kind of engage, you know, engage the community and values that you hold dear. And so we talk about that a lot. That has always been the future of design and continues really radically to be right now, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. David, Amy was a bit predictive in talking about what her students are working on. I'd love to ask you to be predictive. What's next? What's the next generation of community-centric spaces? What will they look like? I know we're in this kind of interim moment with the pandemic, but once we're post-pandemic, whatever that means, how will we rally? What will we talk about? Will there be hubs? Will there be networks? Will there be neighborhoods? You know, all those words that we used pre-pandemic. What will community-centric spaces be like in the future? The near future.
All of those things. Well, you know, I'm not exactly sure how companies will reach out to the external right now, because I think there will be a nervousness for a period of time about bringing outsiders in. But what we are seeing is a lot of reaction from our current clients about their internal spaces. And of course, what they've all realized right away was, first of all, they were highly dense. I sometimes joke that we were creating the sweatshop factories of tech here on the West Coast. But also, they were learning how much work they can do more remotely. They can do more focused work elsewhere. They have a lot more flexibility. And so we have a lot of options. And this is like one of the clients we're looking at. It's a public relations firm. And they're actually a company of sub-companies that all work with different aspects of public relation, but they share a space. But this is their plan of something we designed about 6 years ago. You can see it's a fairly typical techie kind of world. A lot of desking, some desks here and there, and a few open spaces to collaborate. But it was very much come in, go to a desk, do something. And now we're looking, on the next slide, you're seeing a concept that we're working with them about how radically their space could change. And it really is about pretty much the elimination of the need for very many individual desks. And it's really about how can we have a community at 2 or 3 different levels. We have community as a company as a whole. So you can see a good quarter of the floor plan is all devoted to this new coffee cafe, like right when you come in, where everybody throughout the company is encouraged to intermingle and share ideas and talk every day. And then we have these enclaves of other places you can go, and in particular, the brand anchor corners, which is what they're calling the kind of the more individual workspace. And it's made up of a lot of more small scale furniture that's very obviously relocatable by the staff so that they can adjust to what they need. And it's all really about meeting with each other. The next slide shows some combinations of how some of this furniture might work. And everything's kind of disassociated with the architecture, so it can flex as time changes, but it also allows us to start with a more socially distant and then add more later on by just increasing some of the furniture and the closeness. But more importantly, it's about bringing people in to create that community, and then even giving them places within the space to also express their community.
Yeah.
So it's definitely taking what the ironic thing of where I think is going to happen, and I feel like almost everybody's kind of going in this direction, is initially it's about separation, but the long term is it's all more about sharing and togetherness. Once we get past this initial, we have to separate for safety.
Yeah, it's that, you know, it's won't be a flipping of the switch. I'm sure, Amy, you're having these conversations with your students, and Sandy and David, in your work with clients, that they're thinking about this in terms of phases. There's the near future and then the next future.
Right.
And having to be super agile and super flexible to accommodate those two phases of the future that we're going to have in front of us in short order.
And we're
I
unfortunately not going to have a lot of data from the short
Right.
future to
That's
help
right.
us predict the long future.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So companies are going to have to take risks. And I think the good news is, though, because they've seen how agile they can be in these last few months, I think they're also going to be much more likely to be able to take those risks than they were just 6 months ago.
And that bodes well for firms, right? It's, we've got a few minutes, and I want to ask the three of you a question and give our audience time for preparing their own questions. So in just a few moments, we're going to be converting the audience back to on-screen attendance. But let me quickly ask the three of you, during this turbulent time, challenging time, unprecedented time, right? You know all the adjectives. How have you stayed motivated? How have you stayed inspired? How have you stayed creative? What's keeping you moving forward? Sandy, can I start with you?
Sure. It's different every day. Sometimes it's easy, and I have to say I'm lucky that I live in a place where I can get outside easily, and that has been that silver lining, right, of this whole thing. And yet, the thing I miss the most is my team and seeing people and the unexpected things that you'll be walking down the street and something will catch your eye, and all of a sudden you can be off thinking about something that you didn't plan to, right? I feel like this thing has made us all so rote and following our certain world that those unexpected things. So I've been trying to seek them out. I've been reading sections of the paper I don't normally read and trying to explore some of the art sections a little deeper than I had time to. And, the one I've been offering my time to both manufacturers and some educators to do crits. I haven't had the sort of disposable time to do that before. And now I feel like it's so cool to see what other people are thinking right now.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's great.
It's inspiring me. So,
yeah. Amy, what about you? What's keeping you motivated?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a kind of level of connection that's really different than before. Like, the ability to engage people like Sandy. I'm going to be giving you a call.
I opened the door.
Have conversations with people that you normally, it's harder to connect with. And, like I know my mailman's name now. He knows my kids' names. It's kind of amazing. There's this like simultaneous, like super local condition because we're all at home all the time, and a kind of global connectedness that is easier just because I think we don't expect to be in person. And that's been really wonderful. And then, the other distraction, which is kind of a funny one for us, you can see we're under construction. For us, design is a distraction because we're trying to get our house organized. And so that is a very healthy distraction for us from reading too much news and all of those things. Yeah.
I love that local global connection. And David, what about you? What's keeping you going?
Well, I mean, to start with, I think like the protesters to some extent are keeping me going in that, here are all these people who are willing to risk their lives literally for something that they feel so passionate about. And initially it made me even feel guilty about not feeling passionate about things, but it made me relook at what I am passionate about and get involved and do more of the things in those areas. And so it did make me step back and realize where my holes were and things that I needed to fill in. And that was great. And I've been able to really work on those and study. And then I've been using that also to go inward with some artwork. And so really been working on some like personal artwork and how does that connect to what. So it's a little bit of both inward and outward. and the other thing is really, I've actually noticed my observations of things have gone way up when I'm walking on the street and stuff. I'm really noticing things that I walked by all the time before. And I don't know if it's just that I was rushing to work 5 minutes late as always, or if it's just something that we're just in a more perceptive mode right now to see things. It's particularly in San Francisco, it's amazing how many things you walk upon that you walk by every day. And
Yeah.
so
That's great. I love that observation from Sandy's being open to serendipity, to Amy diving deep and immersing herself in design of, sanctuary, what's around you, and then, David activating your activist side and seeing more things that you never noticed before. Thank you so much to the three of you for sharing those. We're about 10 minutes out from close. And so we're at that point where we're going to invite our panelists back on screen to share any questions. And while the IIDA tech team is working their magic, we do have, we want you to share your questions in Q&A, but we also have a question to kind of kick us off and get us started. Peter at Moody's wants to know, what are the key areas of focus for design of future office space related to an increase in remote working and collaboration? And you each kind of touched on that a little bit in some previous answers, but let's revisit that. What are going to be the key areas of focus for the design of future office space? And any of our panelists who want to jump in on that.
Well, I'll jump in.
okay, you haven't talked well.
So connection, spaces for connection, I think are, as if anything, even more important than they were before. People, I think we're going to find organizations are going to give people more of a choice to come to the office or not. And if you're going to go through whatever you need to go through to come in, it better be worth it. So whatever you're providing them with has to be enough of a draw, and it's going to be different for every organization. So I always like to say there's no one size fits all, but I would say places that really resonate with people and they feel supported and they can do what they need to do there.
That's great. Amy or David, do you want to add to that?
She took my word right at the beginning. Connection was my word. So we definitely are on the same wavelength on that, which is not surprising how much Sandy and I work together. Yeah, I think the only thing I will add is I do think that we have a danger of over-rotating to think that all individual and focus work could be done at home or elsewhere, because I do think that we're forgetting that a lot of people here are in compromised positions at their home environments, whether it be with children, pets, everything else. And they actually do need to be able to concentrate in the workspace too. So we need to make sure that we don't completely lose that aspect of it and make it all about connection. But I definitely think we're going to see a lot less of those need for these individual little focus rooms that were suddenly appearing everywhere on every one of our projects.
With, so many of us at this point, we've been working remotely for 6 months, and many of us will continue to work remotely through the end of 2020 and well into 2021. Are we going to need to relearn how to work in an office? Is there, will there be a relearning process that employers and organizations should think about, kind of the re-entry to the workplace? Is there an intellectual component to that for folks returning to the office? Any thoughts around that?
I love that question, Cheryl, because I feel, I read this article, it really resonated with me in the paper, We're All Socially Awkward Now. And and I feel it. It's just like, I see people I know and I just want to get closer, and then I'm backing away out of respect. And I feel that, fast forward 2 years, what is the process going to be, and what are the expectations going to be of me, and what can I do with my team? So I feel communication is going to be super important, and over communicating kind of
Over.
but in it's this balance. I'm laughing because one of my clients is on the call today, and we were talking about how there's a danger of pushing in too much and asking too many questions of everybody versus trying to sort out how we can provide people what they need, and yet not make assumptions like David said that, oh, everybody when they do heads down work is just going to do it from home now. And it's like, yeah, no, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for a real healthy reset on our assumptions about the communities we engage in our designs. I think that idea of like, home for some people is a respite, a place to concentrate, but for others it's totally distracting and difficult, right? And so I think there's a chance for us to really consider like who has access and to what kind of environment and what kinds of environments are we providing and what is appropriate for working in different kinds of ways for different kinds of people. I think as an educator, I'm always optimistic, and I feel like we have a moment here to kind of a really unusual moment to reset, and rethink about all of those things.
This is a question from the audience. What is new business looking like? How are firms generating new business during this time? And again, maybe in that context of the near future and the next future. What is new business development? David, Sandy at Huntsman, like not asking you for any secret sauce or trade secrets, but how are you talking about new business and creating new business?
Well, I think, one of the things we're doing a lot is reconnecting with old business, people that we have unfortunately let off, the radar, and reconnecting with them and making sure that we're able to help with and offer our services to them. It is certainly very difficult to get new work because people are also still not knowing exactly what they're going to go back to work to. So it's hard for them to make a commitment. And so it is looking at that, for a short while, we saw the big jump of how are we going to get people back in the office short term. And that was a very quick little blip. I think it lasted maybe a month looking at work like that. And then either clients decided we're just going to push off until after it's all over and not worry about it, or they, they did minor changes just to get the place to work. But I will say more and more our clients are coming back to us and saying, we have to look at how is it going to be in the future. And, luckily there is something called lease expiration dates. And so there are some clients or some new opportunities just based on people need to move. And I think, unfortunately, we're also going to see a lot of potential idea of how can we shrink and sublease space and do that. So those opportunities are going to be coming at us as well. But if anybody on this call has any really great ideas, we would love them too.
Well, I don't know if we have any time, but some of the other things that we've been doing, our company's focus is both workplace and building repositioning. So we've been partnering with a lot of our landlords and talking to them about what we're hearing from tenants and how they can reposition their buildings to better support their tenants. And that could be a variety of things. But some of it might be repositioning amenity space. So it used to be, okay, what sort of amenity space? Is it a coffee shop? Is it this or is it or that? And now, fast forward a couple of years, what's going to shift in terms of that sort of support that landlords might be providing? So it's a very interesting time. I would say that the smart clients are not thinking that we're a real estate component, but we're actually a strategy component, and we can help them reimagine what the workplace could be instead of we're going to figure this out and then we'll tell you how much real estate we need, because that's always late.
Right, exactly right. Again, that's that aspect of design that is enduring and timeless, is that long-term strategy. The long-term strategy proposition. We are at 2:55 Pacific time and 4:55 Central time. So that's signaling a wrap up. I want to thank Sandy and Amy and David so much for this conversation and for your insight. Community is real, it's emotional, it's physical, it's necessary to our emotional health, and it will endure regardless of the times that we are living in. So I want to thank you all for providing your insight on that. And Deb, if I can ask you to just bring us some closing comments on behalf of KI.
Certainly. Thank you, Cheryl. I second that. Big applause, everyone, for our panelists, David, Sandy, Amy, just amazing. Not only sharing your professional stories, but the personal. And I think that's one of the things that we're all experiencing. Kind of the equity around the Zoom call, right? That there's a sense of sharing. I don't want to say vulnerability, but that you're sharing that. So thank you. I think we all appreciate that and we can relate to that. So that's refreshing, and I love that. So the next thought, what's next? Amy, I loved your point about saying everything starts with a story, right? And designers are orchestrating that human performance. Cheryl and I and the IIDA team have been bringing this conversation, and I'm thinking of it as the orchestra and the different symphonies that we brought it to across the country. We've been in Chicago, Dallas, Kansas City. Ahead of us yet, before the end of the year, we have Atlanta, Boston, New York, and LA. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the different stories, but we all know the common element that comes through is that sense of community. So with that, we want all of our guests here to know IIDA does an amazing job of putting together an executive summary. So you're going to be able to hear the story from every city at the end of the year when we wrap up. That's something that KI and IIDA will be sharing with you. And with that, to our guests, we have to thank you taking time from your day, your commute, your work from home. We know it's a challenge. We all understand Zoom fatigue, but if there's anything, I think IIDA does an amazing job of keeping us engaged and enjoying the time together. But thank you to our guests and our friends that have joined us here today. Typically at this point, if we were gathering live, I would ask everyone to now enjoy a drink and some food, but that's not our situation. So in lieu of giving you swag and all of that, KI is really honored to sponsor the IIDA Educator Diversity Award. So we're shifting that fund that would have normally have been swag and food into that award, which we are very proud and honored to do that, and know that will go to a very, very worthy cause. And to wrap this up, I have to always thank IIDA and that team, amazing group here. We're also such a valuable, just a family of our industry here, and always a special shout out and honor to Cheryl, your continued efforts in promoting equity, social justice, not only in the workplace, but globally. You continue to lead, and we learn from you, and we are so thankful for that. So I think all of us, we want to give a round of applause to Cheryl and IIDA.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you with that.
And I want to thank my IIDA support team who's back at the house, who keeps this Zoom flawless. Like, no Zoom fails at IIDA. So thank you guys back at the house for making this happen.